Hello. I'm Mina, and I'm a hypnotherapist and a relationship coach. And I'm here with Amy Wang. And we thought it would be fun for us to have a chat together because we find so many parallels between the kind of work we do. So let Amy introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Amy Wang, and so I spent most of my life, leading HR, IT, shared services organizations, helping companies navigate change and transformation. And in talking to Mina, I found that most of my career and maybe most relationships don't always happen in a very straight line. Things are not just perfectly linear. And so, like many people, I've experienced transitions where it forces you to pause, reflect, rethink things, and make changes. And so this is why I'm so excited to have this conversation with Mina today.
Yeah, and we also thought that it would be interesting to talk about this from the vantage point of midlife women because there are a lot of similar journeys that we take, and I feel like we don't really talk about them enough. So for me, for instance, I went through a divorce a few years ago, and I know in the career space there are similar incidents where you have to all of a sudden question who you are and what you're going to do next.
And I think this is why this conversation is really interesting, right? So like for many people, especially 40s, or Gen Xers, or older, this is like the first time that they've had to ask the question, what's next? What do I do? And who am I? Right. So we thought it'd be great to talk a little bit about what does loss of identity mean when these changes happen? Because it's a big change. What does reinvention look like? For us Gen Xers or people in their 40s or older, right? Whatever that age and stage of life is. And then what's the strategy of what's coming next? What are the tools out there that helps you get through this and become a better version of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know, for example, in divorce, you really have to rebuild everything from the ground up. You have to find where to live next. You lose a lot of your friends, your social environment changes completely. And a lot of your identity was rooted in being in a partnership with someone. So all of a sudden you have to figure out, who am I without this relationship? Who am I without these friends? And so you really are trying to recreate a new persona. And it can be bewildering because you've also just had this huge loss. And so you're already in kind of this psychologically sensitive phase of your life. And I know that's very true when you lose a job as well. So maybe Amy, you can talk about that.
Yeah, I think that, like you mentioned, identity loss, right? The hardest part about losing a job, I don't think it's the job itself at all, right? And I think for many professionals, especially ones that have been in leadership for a long time, it really becomes a part of who you are and how you identify and define yourself, right? So, like, I was head of HR, I was an executive, I'm a provider for my family. I solve problems for people on a regular basis. I'm actively in the community with this title that I'm recognized for. And then when that disappears, there's a lot of emotional processing that has to happen. I think probably similar to a divorce or a separation with a partner.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like a part of you dies. It feels like the death of something, and there's a lot of grieving to do. There's a lot of maybe self-blame. There's a lot of emotional processing just to be able to wake up in the morning and feel okay about yourself and just have hope for the future. So there's a lot of that going on. So as we mentioned before, we use the word reinvention because that becomes a really important part of this process. Let's talk first about what that looks like in the job space. So when you lose a job and after you've gone through enough grieving, it's probably time for a new job. So what does reinvention look like in the career space?
I think even as part of grief, there's also that release, right? You have to release the anger, maybe resentment, maybe the whys. There's a big this piece of it I recommend people going through before they actually look at what's next, right? And you can't really truly reinvent yourself until you kind of get through that. But part of reinvention really is, what am I shedding from all of this, right? What were my behaviors, my beliefs, my style, my whatever it is that you had before? You need to kind of think about all of that, because I think it's an opportunity too. When you lose an opportunity or leave a job, it's an opportunity to start fresh, right? It's a blank slate. And I think that people forget that, and how actually that could be such a relief and a good part of growing, right? And so I think that is finding who do I want to be next? And not just who will take me when you look at jobs, but what brand do I want to be a part of? Do I want to do something on my own? Do I feel like these certain companies represent who I am as a person? And I think those are really important parts of the reinvention, right? It could be, let me get back in shape again, that maybe I fell off that wagon because I was working all the time. Let me do all the things that I wanted to do, like see my friends, go get a coffee in the morning, go out to dinner. What are all the bucket list things that you couldn't have done because you were working so much, right? I think that's part of the reinvention. It's almost rising from the ashes again and being a new version of yourself. And I think people need to take advantage of that and be really deliberate and intentional when they're in that space.
Oh, I love that because, yeah, I think it's true. It's actually a real opportunity to think back at where you've already been, especially if you are 40 and above. Like you've already had several relationships, you've already done several versions of yourself. And so this is a great time to practice self-awareness. Like, what have I done in the past that really worked? What have I done that didn't work? Like, why did this relationship end in a divorce or a breakup? Because yes, your ex-spouse, your ex played a role in that end, but you were also part of that. You were also complicit. And so it's a great opportunity to say, what did I do in the past that didn't really work for me? And what can I do differently next time around? And really grow through this process to have a much better sense of what it is you want in the future and how you might be better able to achieve that by making some small changes in yourself as well.
Do you find that when someone's looking for a partner in their 20s and 30s, you're looking for a different type of partner, maybe in your 40s and 50s, right? Like what was really exciting and important to you? Like maybe it was like the adventure of travel, going to bars, clubs, parties, whatever it was in your earlier stages in life. That changes, right? If you're doing this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're swept away by the excitement of it, maybe hormones. Also, you're looking for potential at that point. But by the time you're 40 or so, you have a life already that you love, and you're looking for someone to enhance that life, not necessarily to rescue you or to sweep you away. And so I think it takes a lot more deliberate, intentional choice as opposed to just kind of letting things happen, just going with the flow. And I think that's actually a gift too, because we do know ourselves better. We understand life better and we understand other people better. And so we get to a point where we can be very clear about what works for us, what doesn't. Hopefully at this point, you're no longer chasing potential and you're no longer just going with chemistry, because we know that certain kinds of people make us happy, that certain kinds of lifestyles make us happy. And so we can be much, much more deliberate about how we proceed from here.
That makes sense. And I think it's the same with jobs, right? Like the world's changed. Things have changed, like whether it's industry could change, technology, people, even like just what you need, what's important for you. If someone looking for a job in your 20s could be like, I want to work with a lot of like-minded people. I want to have the ping pong table in the office or snacks in the office versus like, what are other things that might be important? You know, is it more flexibility? Is it opportunities to learn? Is it visibility? What are the things that are maybe priority for you earlier in your career versus as you are later, right? The things that are enticing earlier may not be the same as you get more grounded and more intentional, and as you are getting further in experience, that what might be things that you look for in a company aren't the same, right? And the dynamics and the people you work with are going to be different as well.
Yeah, so given all of that, because in both your industry and mine, technology has made it easier to cast a much wider net, I think it's really important for us to be intentional in our search once we have a better sense of what it is we want next. And so, Amy, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of using apps to find your next job, your next opportunity?
Well, having been on both sides, so having been in HR now for a number of years and now being in the stage where I am starting over and trying to figure out what's next, having seen both of that, I will tell you in the period of time has changed a lot, right? Just the job search. You know, when I was looking for a job last time around, it was still quite traditional. You're applying online, you are turning in your resume, you get contacted, and you have a normal conversation. But now I feel like so many companies are using different algorithms. So now you're trying to write resumes that meet an ATS need, right? So like, what's the keyword search? You know, I'm seeing people put lots of resumes with their pictures on it. I'm not there yet. I don't want my picture on a resume. But like, people are doing all those things that remind me a lot of dating and, you know, the other parts of job search. There's a lot more networking involved depending on the level that you want to look for. There's a lot more just numbers games. I feel like as I talk to other people that are in the market, you're applying to anywhere from tens to hundreds, if not thousands of positions online because it's so easy to just do an easy apply on LinkedIn or do some other application process. You're applying to thousands and thousands of jobs is what I'm hearing and seeing people do for months. And so I think the mechanism has really changed. I mean, I remember one of my jobs in my 20s, I met somebody in an elevator. I called him because he gave me his business card. And then I met up with him, gave him my resume, and I got hired, right? It was a very different process. And I remember even before that, you're going in and you're physically applying for jobs. There isn't that anymore. There's truly just, if you're looking for a high level position, is finding the right recommendation, referral network. And maybe that's a little bit about like dating as well, right? Hoping that you have an introduction from a friend or a family member or someone in your network versus having to blindly go through the apps. I don't know if you had to do any of that, Nina, or you could talk a little bit about what that looks like in dating.
Yeah, I was doing apps back in the 90s, so I've been doing them for a while. So yes, to all of that. I mean, on the one hand, it's easier, but it's easier for everyone else. So like you said, there are thousands of applicants. Same thing in dating apps. A lot of people get multiple texts, and that also translates to multiple rejections. And so let's be real here, right? Like it's easier on the one hand just to do the thing. But on the other hand, it can really wear away at you and make you feel like you're not good enough or you're not this or that. So I think there are some best practices, and I think they apply both to the career and relationship space. So in terms of using dating apps, because of the high volume, you really have to get specific about who you are, first of all. Like put up a profile where you're really clear on the unique attributes you bring to the table. Like don't do a generic profile about how you love hiking and how you like going to restaurants. Like everybody says that. And so you don't stand out at all. And then the other thing is to filter. Like don't answer every like that you get. Be really clear on what it is you're looking for a partner. And so that's another step we didn't talk about so much. But I think when you go into this reinvention phase, you have to become really clear about the kind of life you want to build next. And that includes having very clear ideas about the standards you want to see your partner actually meet. And so once you have that, you need to like be really ruthless in just choosing the men who really fit. If that means it's one guy every 3 months, that's fine. Like, yes, it is a numbers game. And the nice thing about technology is that we can get exposed to so many more jobs and so many more potential partners. But it also means we have to protect our time and energy and do it in a way that's smart and that doesn't wear you out. Amy, what would you add to that in terms of the job search?
I think that's a great point, right? So I think when it comes to jobs, you're asking more like, instead of who's going to hire me, what kind of organization do I want to be a part of, right? And instead of like, will someone choose me? It's more like, well, is this match good for both of us? So like when people go into interviews, I recommend it's not just about them interviewing you. You are interviewing that company, that hiring manager. This is going to be your boss, right? That typically who's hiring you for this job. And if people know that the number one reason you leave jobs is because of your boss, you definitely need to think about how selective you are by taking this job, right? Otherwise, you can potentially not be happy, and then you're just going to start all over again. And I can say this, not so long ago, I had an interview, and I was so excited about this role. I went through 5 rounds of the interviews, and I finally met with the hiring manager, who would be my boss in this role. And I knew this person outside of work, but when I got to see them in the work environment, I knew it wasn't a fit. And rather than have to ruin the relationship, outside of that in my network to work for this person, I pulled out of it because I knew it wouldn't be a fit. And it would have been an amazing opportunity with an amazing company, but you have to be able to make really intentional choices in who you're with. Just because I think with relationships, right? You could be friends, but maybe you don't want to be a partner. And it's the same thing with a working relationship. You could be friends, in networking events and social things, but maybe as a boss, once you get to know them in that interview space and you picture that, it might not be the right fit. And you want to maybe step away so that you don't burn that bridge, right? And you can stay friends or rather than changing the relationship.
Yeah, actually, that also makes me think too that sometimes we let our ego make the choice. So with a job, for example, you might have gotten an offer from a company that's famous and sexy, or a title that makes you look really good, but it might be the wrong fit because the people are wrong. And it's the same with relationships. Like you might have met someone who really likes you, who's hot and who's tall and who's like got the great pedigree, but it's not necessarily someone who's going to give you the kind of life that you envision. So I would say, again, get really clear on what matters to you. Like your day to day in a job probably matters a lot. Day to day in a relationship matters a lot too. If somebody's great on paper, but they're never available to you because they're basically married to their job, then, that's maybe not the right fit for you. But if you're someone who loves to work and you don't have that much time to give to your personal life, know that too. So it's really about knowing yourself and knowing your own needs and looking for that and not letting these ego decisions be the ones to determine your future.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where, like, when you make these changes, when you select your job, you select your partner, you have to look at it with the intention of, like, maybe this will help me grow, but you have to go in with clarity. And that's where that part of time where you're doing your reinvention is really thinking about what's important to me. What is it that I really need in this next step? Who is it or what is it that's going to make me grow and make my life better, right? I think each change requires so much honesty with yourself and what's lost. And you need a little bit of courage to reinvent yourself and be really intentional about what you want. Otherwise, you're going to start all over again, right? And so I think that's a really important part of this learning journey when you are taking this big change. And one of the things I say about work is just because you can do everything doesn't mean you should. What are the things that are really top priority for you? And focus on those as you think about your next role. And maybe that's the same thing with your partner, right? So like you might want someone who has all the attributes like you just named. But if you were really going to pick what's really most important to you foundationally, right? What's really important to you inside that makes you really happy? And that's really what you need to go after.
Exactly. So, do you have any suggestions for questions that you might ask at an interview so you have a better sense of whether it's a good fit or not?
That's a great question. Just like when people come in and I interview them, I go in, same concept. Like, what does it make you feel when you go in there, right? And I would ask questions when it comes to the interview, like, what happened to the person that was here last? Like, why did they leave or what made them move on, right? And I think that's important with a relationship too, right? Like, why didn't it work out with the last person? What are you looking for in maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years? Like, what would be a successful relationship or applicant look like in this period of time, right? So I think those are important things to look at. What's their long-term thing? So I would ask questions like that. Or even, what's the team dynamic look like? What's the culture? Because that's also, I think, again, like, what's that person's family? What's your in-laws look like, right? If they're actually progressing in this relationship, what are your bosses look like? So like, even though you're talking to the hiring manager may not be that high up in the hierarchy. You don't know where they are. What's the broader organization look like? Where do you fit in this? How do you feel like your team is treated? Or how do what does that look like? Because those I think are really important, right? Because when you're brought in, you're already expected to have the skills and the experience they're looking for. Now you're talking about how do you fit with each other in that role, in that company. And I think that's really what's important from the next step. What would success look like? Why are you filling this role? And what would make you feel like I've done the right thing by bringing you on, right? And I think that's probably similar. What would make you feel like this is the right relationship to be in?
Yeah, so you named 3 different kinds of questions that are really just perfect for relationships too. So when you're on a date, you said, for example, the first one was, why did the last person not work out? That's such an important one in dating because you can see a lot of how they take accountability for their role in how the last relationship didn't work out. Because obviously they're in the market because their last one, ended. And so that's a good sort of self-awareness question. Like, why do you think it didn't work out? And if they start blaming their ex and just kind of bad mouthing their ex and take no accountability whatsoever, that tells you a lot. And I'm sure that's true in the job space too. And then secondly, you talked about alignment. Like, where do you see this company in 5 years, 10 years? You want to make sure that your life goals are aligned. And so those are the kinds of questions you might want to ask your date too. Like, if you could wave a magic wand and have exactly the kind of life you want in 10 years, what does that look like? And if it's a very different vision from yours, then it's just not going to work out no matter how hot they are, right? And then the third one is about the ecosystem. Like you're talking about other senior members, the culture of the company. And I think that's really true for relationships too. Do you have ecosystems that are compatible, that can work together? Because maybe they are part of a big, strong family and they're always doing things together. Is that the kind of ecosystem that you want to be a part of? Some people would love that, other people not so much. So I think those are really great questions.
Yeah, no, I was going to add one more thing. One other thing I think is interesting and important too, when you're looking for a job, there's the job description, right? And hopefully there's clarity in the job description on what you're responsible for, who's doing what, and what the benefits and compensation looks like, right? And I think that's the same even for a relationship. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you want to know who's responsible for what, right? So that in a relationship, maybe your partner's better at X, but you're better at Y. And I think money is an important part in every relationship, whether it's professional or personal, and who's paying for what, where is it coming from? I mean, if you can maybe elaborate a little bit on that and your perspective, but I feel like that's one of the things that can make or break a professional or personal relationship.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like a lot of times we're afraid to talk about those things at the start. And I think it's so much better to just get it out into the open. Even something as simple as who's paying for the first date. Why do you think the guy should pay? Or why do you think you should go Dutch? It makes it really clear what your values are. And so it's really not a criticism of the other person if you decide they're just too different and it's not going to work. Or it's not a criticism of you if they decide the same. It's more like, no, we're just not aligned. And so it's a different way of looking at dating and maybe of jobs too. When you're looking for work and you don't get an offer, it's not necessarily that you weren't good enough. It's just, it wasn't a good fit. And you're going to keep looking until you find something that is in alignment with you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The other correlation it just had me think about was like, the family or kids or your team. So like going into a job, you want to think about, am I going to be an individual contributor? Am I inheriting a team? Or will I have to hire a team? Who are the people I'm working with? Is this going to be a matrix environment? Am I going to have multiple reporting lines? And what does that look like? And I think that also going into a relationship, depending on the age and stage of your life, a potential partner may have children, or maybe you're still young enough to want to have children, right? So maybe talk a little about what that looks like.
Yeah, not just kids, but with midlife, we're also having to think about aging parents. And there are also friends. And, you're not just dating one person at the end of the day, right? Like oftentimes there are other people who are involved. And how much are they involved? And are these people that, you can also feel good spending your time with? And so I do really think you have to look at the entire ecosystem. And that might not be apparent right away. Like on the first day, you're not going to meet all of their best friends. But over time, not just getting to know them, but also seeing how this person interacts with the people in their lives tells you a lot about what your relationship might end up looking like. So I think it is really good to pay attention to the people in their lives, just like you would look at, all the team members at work. Are there anything else that we should be clear about? Because I do think it's so important to have standards when we're going into dating, to have like a clear idea of what's acceptable, what's preferable, what's definitely not acceptable. Are there things like that in a career search?
I mean, definitely once you have the job, there's a whole bunch of things that you need to be aware of. But even the search, I would suggest think about the type of industry you want to work in or role you're interested in. And that also kind of adds to where you network, right? And where you spend your time. So it could vary. For example, let's say you want to start working in higher education. So maybe volunteer in organizations or events that exposes you to the higher education community. Or if you want to work in startups, then you could go volunteer or work at be around where a lot of startups are, right? So the other piece is if you have like an industry or niche or function you want to work in, I would say surround yourself with those types of people, because that will get you closer to the goal that you have and learn more about what you want to do. And that's probably similar, right, with relationships. Like you're going to probably date the types of people you're going to surround yourself most with. And you have to get out there.
Yeah, I was just actually saying this exact thing to a client this morning, because she was saying she wants to meet somebody who's outdoorsy, who likes to go camping, etc. So I said, well, then you have to do those activities here in town, like find some meetups where people are hiking or people are organizing camping trips, and put yourself in those spaces. You don't have to just restrict yourself to apps. You can actually do the activities that you want to do with someone and be there so that you meet other like-minded people. It's super important.
Yeah. And I think it's exactly the same with, the job search, right? It's part of knowing who you are and liking those things. And I also think this might be the thing that's different between a relationship and job search is that in a job search, you hope that you don't have to find another job or you're going to start looking. But I think the difference too is you always continuously want to be networking and keeping your eyes out there, right? So maybe that would be the difference in job searching than a relationship.
That might be a problem with dating.
Is that you always want to be aware of what's out there and what's next, and how do you continue to progress and grow, and be aware of all those things. So I think that would be the one thing that I would probably not recommend. I don't know about you, but like when you're in a secure relationship, maybe not do that. But in a job, regardless of how secure you are, you should always think about like continuing to grow yourself, right? What new skills can I develop? What new things can I learn? And what new organizations can I, join? How do I expand my network and get to know more people so that either you can continue to progress in the organization you're in, or maybe, try something different or be ready if something should happen because, maybe you have a little bit more control in a relationship, but you never know. But in a job search or even in a career, you never know when something could happen. And you want to be prepared for plan B so that you kind of have like a parachute to kind of go into something else. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah. No, I think in relationships, that's probably not the case unless you run polyamorous, but that's a whole nother interview. But I think we covered a lot of ground, and of course we could go on and on and on, but maybe it might be useful for our listeners now to know where they can get more information. We're both on LinkedIn. Amy, can you tell our listeners where they might get more information from you, see more of you, hear more from you?
Absolutely. So definitely find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest, best way to find me. Amy Wang 168 is my number there if you can't find, because there's a million Amy Wangs listed. But also I'm in multiple different workshops, conferences, and I do have a blog. So feel free to look in on those. But I'm always open for a direct message and continue any type of conversation. Happy to join any further conversations on these topics as well.
All right. Wonderful. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Mina Yang. I think I have True Connection in my title somewhere, but I'll put all the links down below. And I'm doing a free workshop in April on dating. So if you'd like to learn more about dating, please let me know and I can send you all the information you need. So I hope you got a lot out of this conversation. I certainly did. I mean, it's just remarkable to me how many parallels there are between finding work that really satisfies you and makes you happy, and finding a relationship that does the same. Would you like to say any last words, Amy?
No, I think you summarized it fantastic. I think this was a great conversation. I love the parallels that we found just from meeting on LinkedIn ourselves. So this is why I highly recommend go reach out to people on LinkedIn, find us on LinkedIn, because you never know what amazing conversations and amazing people you'll find doing so.
Yay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.